you doing?
Good.
Thank you for joining me today, and welcome to the Evolve podcast.
Excited to be on.
Yeah, absolutely. Evolve podcast is an open forum on personal growth and cultivating a positive mindset. Today I have with me NIKKIA Young. She is an endurance athlete based here in Richmond, Virginia. She is a coach as well for Fitness Protection LLC, as well as sports backers. So I know you have previously run the Richmond Marathon and half marathon, and you're working with sports backers now as one of their coaches for the training team for a walking group. Is that correct?
Yeah, we kick off this weekend.
That's exciting. How many people do you have in your group?
So right now we have about 25, which is really good for a first starting half team. So we're excited to see how many more people sign up. A lot of folks wait till the last minute, or they let their friends go to one and be like, all right, it was okay. We can all go together. So we'll see. I'm hoping that maybe we can hit May 30-ish. Mm-hmm. And I know that we'll add people over the course of the season, people do get injured and things like that. So.
Right. Because people can sign up for the training team as they get closer and closer to the race date, right?
Yeah, we usually cut it off about 4 weeks in because we don't want people jumping in too fast. But even if they can't make it for the half team, the 8K team will kick off, I think, probably in about a month or so. So there's still some opportunity to get some training in before the race in November.
Awesome. And I know you've done many races as well on your own. Can you tell me about some of those races that you've done?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of races, 28 half marathons and 4 full marathons. My fulls have been Richmond was my first. I did Chicago. Chicago's probably my favorite. There are 29 neighborhoods over 26 miles. Fantastic course, lots of energy, just a lot of fun. I've done the New York City Marathon. That was probably hard, and what I would consider one of the hardest because it was starting, the sun was going down about halfway through my race because you start at the middle of the day. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't realize that about New York, is that you actually don't get started until 11 o'clock. And so it's all right, well, I guess I'm going to be running into the dark. And that's pretty much what happened. And then I've done Berlin over in Germany. That was the most recent half I've done in 2019, or recent full I've done in 2019. Took my whole family. So that was different. They have not seen me race in America, but they thought Germany was the way to go. But that one was a challenge. It was a lot of just weather. It was humid. I was not smart and did not learn any German before going. People are like, "Oh, you'll be fine. Everybody speaks English." That is not true. So I learned my lesson that way.
That's cool. You got to share that experience with your family.
Yeah.
You have a lot of siblings?
I do. I have 4 brothers and sisters. I have 2 younger sisters and 1 younger brother.
Are you the oldest?
I am the oldest.
That's cool. I'm actually the oldest of 5 kids as well. I have 1 brother and 3 sisters.
Yep. It's. Do you feel like you're the wrangler?
Sometimes I am. Yeah. So it could feel like herding cats sometimes when everyone wants to do something but is indecisive about where to go or what to do. Yeah. So sometimes you got to make a decision for everyone.
Yep, I usually am the decision maker, and I will definitely do a head count. When we were really young, we would have to do a head count because it's where is everybody? Call off numbers. So that was always fun, and I think about them a lot because I don't live nearby anymore. I'm from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, so I moved to Richmond. But luckily, my youngest sister is going to VSU, so she's nearby. And so I get to spend some more time with her because she's the baby. So, and I didn't get to spend a lot of time with her because we're 11 years apart. So now it's kind of cool because it's I get to enjoy you as an adult.
Yeah, it's fun. You definitely get to develop new relationships with your siblings as you get older.
That is very true.
So I'm curious, did anyone in your family participate in the marathon with you in Berlin?
No, nobody does. Kind of like, I will say that one of my siblings is on a really cool fitness journey right now, but not as far as like long distance running. I would love to convince my family to do a like 5K, like a walking 5K somewhere fun, scenic. But we have not gotten to that point yet.
What's the fitness journey that your sister is on?
So she got a diagnosis of hypertension around the brain, which is very interesting, a couple of years ago. And so the doctors were like, well, we could do this by surgery, or we could do this by, just some different lifestyle changes. And so she's like, all right, like, let's, put in the work. And she really has put in the work. I'm really proud of her. I think she's lost over 40 pounds. So it's like, it's cool to... It's sad that it took that diagnosis, but it's also at the same time when you've got so many things going on. Like a lot of us are really just active, like in our communities. Like she works at a school and she has a baking business. And so it's like, when you're doing all the things, sometimes you end up putting yourself on the back burner. And so I'm really proud of her for putting herself forward to just take the time and put in the work. So it's really cool to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know if she was inspired by you at all to like take that action? Have you guys had that conversation?
That's a good question. I really don't think so. I think that it's funny because she's the sister that's right behind me. And so what's cool about us is that our parents let us all be our own people. Like it wasn't like you didn't have to be like NIKKIA to be great. And she really did kind of carve her own way out of things. And I've always looked up to her for that, because it could be so easy to be like, oh, I'm just going to do what she did because that's what she did to be great. But she really has kind of been her own person the whole time. So I think for her, and with most folks, you kind of have to dive into your own why before really being willing to do what you think is necessary or what you might find to be necessary. So I think she probably more so did not take any kind of inspiration from me.
That's great. So let's go back. Let's go back to what your life was like before you started getting into running, and what was the initial reasoning for starting that?
Yeah, so there's like a couple like vector points that I feel like kind of kicked off my running journey.
Yeah.
I will say that back in college, and I've always kind of been active, right? I played sports in high school. My parents had us in, the dance, jazz, tap, ballet, a little bit of karate here or there. We did swimming for a summer. So we were always like active, but it was never like how people would like that were going for long-term life sporting event kind of thing. So, but when I went to college, I was not good enough to be on any of those teams, which is just fine. But I'm in a sorority, and a lot of my sorority sisters were really good about just including like physical activity in like their day-to-day. Like it wasn't like, oh, we have to go to the gym to fit into XYZ dress or things like that. It was really like, oh, like let's go on this hike because we'll see a cool waterfall. And living out in Salem or Roanoke area, you do have a lot of really cool hikes. I probably should have done more hiking. Now that I'm like, oh man, I wish I lived closer to like be able to just like hop out and go do a hike in less than 30 minutes. But a lot of them signed up to do the Blue Ridge Marathon one year. And I was like, you know what? One day I'm going to do this race, which is so funny because at the time the idea of a marathon was absurd. All of that sounded ridiculous. Yeah. So one summer I was on campus. I stayed on campus every summer to work. And I was like, you know what? Like, let's go ahead and let's just give it a shot. Like, let's sign up for, a 5K. And so some of my sorority sisters were like, we're going to sign up for this color run in Henrico. And of course I didn't realize that Henrico was Richmond.
Pretty much.
I love it when you Google like Henrico. Sometimes it makes it seem like it's a whole different place, and you're like, oh, it's all in there together. So it was really kind of funny and full circle, right? To end up living in Richmond after my first race really being a color run. I think it was like out in like the like when the West Creek area was all soccer fields.
Okay.
So that was really like my first entry. And then I kept signing up for 5Ks. And then when I graduated college, I had a little fun employment summer is what I called it, where I was like, couldn't find a job, but I finally got an offer out here in Richmond and was like, all right, well, you know what? I'm going to go. And then I got into the 10K training team, had a blast on the 10K training team because people let me just go my own pace. Mm-hmm. And nobody ever discouraged me over that. It was like, she's there, she's moving. Mm-hmm. We're gonna stick. The coaches stuck around until I got back, and so that was just a really nice introduction to like, oh, okay, if I can run this pace and it's not bothering anybody, and I did this for my first 10K, which we all know as the gateway drug to long distance running in this town. It was a blast. And so that really led to like, all right, well, maybe I can run, 6 more. And so I signed up for the half marathon training team, had a blast there, met some lifelong friends. And then I talked somebody into joining the marathon training team. I was like, oh, they're never gonna say yes, right? They absolutely said yes. And so we were signing up for the marathon training team. And I ended up actually running my first marathon with a horrendous sinus infection. Would not recommend today, but at the time I was just too hard-headed to say no.
So, and yet you still did it, right?
Survived is really the method, but I did finish. So it's really funny to like look back at my running journey because I feel like I would say I would go back and be like, you shouldn't have done that. But we learn, right? We learn through the process. We grow through the process. And now that I'm coaching other people, it's funny because I catch myself telling folks what to do. And I'm like, but there was absolutely a time where I'd done blank. And this is the lesson I learned from it. Please don't follow me.
Yeah, I can say the same. And, fortunately, I've been able to help other runners along the way as well. The first time I did the Richmond Half Marathon, I wore brand new shoes that I got the day before the race. No one told me that you shouldn't do that. So every time I hear of friends getting into running, I'm like, don't wear new shoes the day before your race. That will save you a lot of trouble and a lot of pain.
Oh, yeah. Nothing new on race day. And to be fair, you probably fell into the normal thing that in a logical world, wouldn't it make sense? Like, oh, I have my best shoes. Like they're brand new. They have no mileage on them. So they should be perfect, right? No, but also, you go to an expo, you see all these new things, and you try all the. You're like, oh, I'm gonna try this tomorrow because it's gonna make me feel so much better. And it's a very normal thing to land in when folks are either new to running or, I will say most runners I know just kind of put on a pair of shoes one day and go out, right?
Yeah.
Which is great because that means that they made up their mind, like, I am going to go out there and I'm going to do the thing. It doesn't matter if it's a block, doesn't matter if it's a mile, doesn't matter how far I go. And I love that. And I also appreciate that people refuse to look up everything on the internet, because if you're trying to follow everything on the internet, you're going to feel like you're going in circles. Mm-hmm. So it's a common thing we hear and see where people are like, I read this thing online, I thought I was going to try it, but then I saw this other thing that said that was terrible. And it's like, the best thing you can do in running is just finding out what works for your body, what works for you, and leaning into that, and then also treating yourself kind of like an experiment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of experimentation.
Testing to see what works for you. Because let me tell you, the things that worked for me 5 years ago, I cannot do anymore, or I can't stomach the taste of some of the nutrition that I used to use and things like that. So it's good.
What were some of the things that worked for you when you were getting started?
Getting started. Actually getting fitted for shoes. Because I think a lot of times we think, this is the best and brightest shoe. And we all have brand recognition of, certain companies, Nike, Saucony, Brooks. And so what a lot of times people will do is go out and just buy a pair of shoes and think that that's what they're supposed to do. When really they make different shoes for different foot shapes. And so, and actually my foot shape changed over time. So I first started out with a very high arch. And then after a couple races, my arches fell. And so I had to completely change the kind of shoes I utilize. But getting good shoes and good socks too. I'm a big fan of having proper socks. And then the other thing that I did early that I still do today is making sure to have enough glide. Like some people use Body Glide. I really like Sport Shield because it is silicone based, so it doesn't melt into the skin. So that is, I would say, putting a buffer, because even on the coldest days in Richmond, Virginia, you're probably going to catch some humidity.
Yeah, you're pretty much guaranteed on that. So yeah, that's great. I started running in like 2012. It was after I got a DUI charge, and I was trying to be healthier, trying to turn my life in a different direction. And I started running with this app called Couch to 5K.
Yeah.
On this podcast, and it helped me get started with running my first 5K. And then my family invited me out to run 10Ks with them on like the turkey trot Thanksgiving that they did. That's become less of a tradition. But my family still is like very active, and we prioritize doing some type of workout before the big meal on Thanksgiving Day. And then I also, just found my own running journey through, running 10Ks and then eventually running a half marathon and a full marathon. One day I even did a 24-hour ultra marathon with my friend David. We had to run just over 6 miles 6 times in one day over like 4-hour intervals. So that was a really interesting and fun day. Have you ever done any ultra marathons?
I was signed up for my first ultra that was supposed to happen May 2020, and we have not looked back. But it's one of those, like, I need to find the right one. There's a couple, there's one in New Jersey that's like a 1 mile loop in a fairground, and people will do that for 5 full days. There's one out in Roanoke that's on like a little 1.5 mile like path, and I was like, maybe I'll do that, because I really like the mountains. Went to college out there. The running community is fantastic out there as well. Like, we're very lucky across Virginia to just have a very solid like bunch of people that enjoy running and doing crazy things. So I feel like I would never be alone out there either. I've yet to see an ultra that I want to do in and around town. So I'm like, all right, but yeah, it's on the docket, but it's not, it doesn't have a date attached to it yet.
Yeah. Well, the one that we did was a virtual ultra. So you can do it anywhere. It was sponsored by Yeti.
The Yeti, yeah.
So I'm sure that's happening again this year. I don't know. But I just got to get back into doing marathon because I have been running more with my dog. The longest we've run together is 11 miles since we adopted her a couple years ago. I feel like I could definitely run a half marathon. Running a full marathon is a bit more challenging. And I did a trail marathon in 2019 successfully, though I had to walk for the last 6 miles. And then I attempted the Richmond Marathon at Dory Park in 2021. And I didn't finish it. I had to stop at mile 18 just because I had a lot of knee pain that was
good for you for knowing your boundaries, because there's a lot of folks that will run themselves into the ground.
Yeah.
And then, are not able to even a season or two later. So I think that's the big thing too with running, is that we tend to be a little bullheaded, and even having to walk the end of a marathon, you're still moving forward.
Yeah, exactly.
And you didn't die. And so
yeah, I know. And I had to tell myself that, keep moving forward. I got it tattooed on my arm for that exact reason. I still finished it. So
exactly.
I had to swallow my ego a little bit and give myself some grace, but I'm very grateful for that experience, looking back on it.
Oh yeah. I think the marathon and any race really has a lesson in it. I think a lot of folks are, sometimes people are like, well, what are you doing out there? Like, you're taking a long time. And it's like, that time is great space for solving the world's problems, solving all of my own problems, conversations with myself, and really also learning lessons, right? Like, oh, I'm not going to do that again. Oh, I know where all the really great porta potties are in town. I've learned a lot, it's, and really just like what you are capable of. And then also, really shoring up that relationship with my body is probably one of the best things to come out of like distance running in general, is being able to like look back and be like, you know what, that was not my strongest, but was it my mind or was it my body? And being able to tease that out, right? Because in that time you're reflecting, you're thinking about things, you're like, oh, was that a pain? Oh, was that me? Did I trip over something? And really analyzing, doing like a full body scan to be like, okay, and when I say body scan, I also mean mental scan too, right? Am I in a mental space where I'm taking care of myself, where I'm being nice to myself while I'm on that run? Or am I in a space where I'm like, oh, this is stupid and I don't know why I'm doing this?
Yeah, absolutely. Those challenging questions do come up, like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? And then you have to like grapple with that because you have the time to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're out on that course, and you can either choose to ignore those thoughts and let them fester, or like just really address it and come to terms with it. Hopefully you do that before the race starts, but they do come up sometimes during the race, and that's
yes. That's one of the big things for me, is like just and I try to practice those things while I'm doing my training runs, right? Because that's the whole point of a training run, is not just to make sure that your body's ready, but that mentally you're in the game, and just talking nicely to yourself. Like, I think a lot of times we don't lean into like the it's good to talk nicely to yourself, but let me tell you the difference. It's almost it almost feels like a weight is lifted when you start talking nice to yourself. Like, oh, I can't believe I'm doing this. Like, isn't it a beautiful day? Aren't we just so happy to be alive? And I'm sure people probably see me out running, and I probably look ridiculous because I usually have a smile on my face. Like, I'm happy to be there. I'm happy to still be here on this side of the dirt. And so I think it's just important to like remember that part of it too, because there's a lot of people who can't run. There's a lot of people who don't have that opportunity, don't have that chance at that kind of joy. And so, might as well do it big for myself and for those folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that gratitude and positive mindset practice something you share with your coaching clients as well?
Yes, because I get a lot of messages where it's like, I can't believe I didn't hit, XYZ target pace, what have you.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it was miserable. And especially like this time of year, because it is a swamp outside. Even today, when it felt pretty good for being like 88 degrees, it's still like, oh, it's kind of still gross outside. People really take that in. And a lot of people that tend to pick up running are very type A people. And so they feel like if they don't hit the exact target, or they don't hit the exact pace, or they don't hit the exact mileage, well, that was just junk. That was junk mileage. When really I was like, hey, you got out there, you left your house, you got out there, or you were able to power up a treadmill, you got moving, you got this amount of miles in. And it's really most times just time on your feet that is the most important thing when you are training for any distance, right? It's just that adaptation of being upright and moving.
Yeah, absolutely. When did you get into coaching?
So I got into coaching pretty soon after I did my first full. I was brought on to an 8K training team, which is so fun because the funny thing about 8K training team is that it's the secret gym of the like Richmond marathon races. It's on the shorter side. It tends to be a much smaller team. They meet all over the city. Yeah. But they're usually a dedicated group of folks that are like, look, I want to train for this 5 miles. I want to be ready. And they are there. They know that it's a short training season, but that doesn't bother them. And so after that, I started doing the 10K training team. And then, and I've still been coaching the 10K training team. I've done Rockwood Park. I had a location out on Grove Avenue this go round. And then I've done probably a couple others, but I've been coaching, I think, 10K training team since 2016. And then I picked up the half marathon training team during COVID. There was finally a coaching spot available. And I was like, you know what? I've been wanting to give back to this team. Previously, I had done SAG, so supplying gear or stop and go. And it's basically where folks get their water for the half team. And I had worked that for 2 or 3 years. And so I was like, I really just want to coach. I'm ready to coach because I feel like I had hit my goals and the big things that I wanted to do. And I also figured I had learned some lessons along the way and I'm willing to kind of apply them. And the other thing that was really important to coaching and for me to get into coaching was I believe that if we're going to say that we're going to be inclusive, if we're going to really support all kinds of people, bodies, levels of ability, there needs to be somebody at the back. And so I am a strong believer of being the sweeper coach. Mm-hmm. And if that means that I'm out there for 5-6 hours, that means I'm out there for 5-6 hours because you signed up and you signed up for an experience, but also you signed up for support. And so that was also kind of the thing that stemmed the walking team is that, you know, hey, my run is probably the pace of a lot of people's walks. And we do want to also make sure that we're providing a space for walkers because the time limit does allow for it. And so we had a couple people last year, but we're still part of a larger team. So this is the first time we're going to have our own team of walkers. And we got some pretty experienced folks that I'm really excited to just bring back into the fold. Maybe it's injury, maybe it's, you know, you just want to test this fitness thing out. And the idea of running is a little, you don't like it, but you know that you can make the distance. Some people are using it as part of their rehab, as far as like physical rehab, like maybe they've thrown a shoulder or thrown something else. And it's really just for folks that, like, I don't know if you've noticed, you probably have. Richmond has a good walking community. Like, and they're not just little old ladies. They're not just mall walkers. Like, there are people that religiously walk out here. And so I think that opening up, hey, you want to do this race while walking and, you know, walking with purpose, right? We're not going on a leisurely stroll,
right.
But it's opening it up to a new demographic. And I'm really excited about that.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's some adaptive athletes in there as well. You know, people who have some sort of mental or physical handicap that either can't run due to, you know, being in some sort of chair or bike. Does the Richmond Marathon and Half Marathon allow for that? I know they have like some teams that support, but if an adaptive athlete wanted to do it, are they able to do that?
Yeah, so there's a lot, and we're so lucky in Richmond. I call it the land of competing nonprofits, but honestly, truly, it's like, you know, it gives you some options, right? Like there's Sportable, there's Inclusive Racing. I think there's Ainsley's Angels. I feel like I'm missing at least 3 to 4 other groups that exist that support adaptive athletes. Because I know last year there's an athlete named Woody. He has Wilson's disease. He was on the marathon training team and his mom pushes him. His mom name is Kim, I believe. But it's funny because we're all like, Woody! And she's like, yep. But Woody's all there. He can wave, he can acknowledge, and but he isn't an adaptive athlete. I think they're trying to hit all 50 states, which is really cool too.
So I know that there are people who are pushed by other athletes. But do you know of any athletes that are like, you know, self-propelled?
Yes, I think the hand cycle groups they're starting to be very popular across the country. I actually ran a race out in Cincinnati recently where, and they even had little signs which were nice because it's like, oh, you're letting them know that they need to downshift or otherwise they're going to fly off this hill. Yeah. But it was really nice to see those signs out there because it's like, oh, good. Like you're not just saying, hey, come sign up.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying, hey, come sign up, and we're going to make sure that you are alerted to what might be perilous on this route. So, and I think that we do, and I know that they at least race. I don't think we've had anybody come to the training teams, but I think Sportable does have training teams for adaptive athletes that are propelling themselves.
Right. Yeah, I've volunteered with Sportable before. I just couldn't remember if they were having participants in either like the half marathon or the full marathon.
Yeah, they're usually out there, but they're usually so far ahead, mostly to make sure that there's enough space for them to navigate the course.
Mm-hmm.
I'm usually in the back, but we do see them. I usually am parked out on Brook Road on race day as a coach, because we want to be spread out along the course to support not only our athletes, but anybody that might need help. And usually we see them passing through, and it's exciting to kind of make a tunnel and cheer folks on, and also just kind of give people maybe a little break before, having to get through Lombardi and down that hill on Fifth.
Yeah, but I mean, you're totally right. I mean, the running and the walking community in Richmond is, thriving and very popular. And, I walk my dog all the time around like the van in the museum district, and always see a lot of the same people out walking. So it is really cool to see that, and to know that the Richmond Marathon, which is such a huge event in the city, like marathons in other cities, like to have the community really come together in support of this event and the cause that surrounds it, to just get out there and be active. And they raise some money as well for. Is it for Anthem?
Anthem actually is the primary sponsor, usually. I don't know if it's changed recently.
It might be Allianz.
Mm-hmm. Allianz is one too. CarMax is out there. But they usually raise money for the programs that Sports Backers puts on through the year. So they put on bike RVA, so like making sure that there are bike lanes and that they're safe. Kids Run RVA is another program that they support and actually put on. So putting running clubs in schools, and they provide the volunteers and, all the materials needed. Because as much as we think like, oh, running's an easy sport, all you have to do is throw on some shoes. Well, you need shoes, you need clothes, and, not all kids and families can provide that for themselves. So being able to bridge that gap is really important, because that's a barrier to entry to the sport.
Right. And you mentioned that you have another job outside of your running coaching. What do you do?
I am a financial analyst for a quasi-governmental agency, which is so funny because people don't realize that I have a job. I think a lot of people think that either run coaching is my full-time job or I'm a philanthropist, which I thoroughly enjoy those things, and I love being known for those things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I actually am managing a transition for a specific platform to the cloud. And so I manage those costs by monitoring them, but then also basically coaching people on how to transition the mindset, because when you're doing technology, they're like on-prem is very different than the cloud. And when we move to the cloud, they've got to change how they think about spend. They have to change how they think about architecture, all those kinds of things. And so in that transition, I'm having a lot of folks that are like, well, what do you mean this changed this way? Or what do you mean we have to now monitor things that we've never had to check before? So monitoring and changing some of that behavior, and then also seeing where we can potentially save tax dollars is another space that I am actively working in. So I monitor that portfolio. I make sure that vendors actually show up and do what they're supposed to do and meet the contract needs. And if they don't, we try to get some of that money back because it's America paying for it. So yeah.
Cool. And do you have any aspirations of being like a full-time running coach and athlete?
No. And here's why. And I will say, and I've seen it get worse over the last couple of years. I'm friends with a couple very popular plus size, larger, specifically Black runners.
Yeah.
Myrna. I'm friends with Martinez. I've been on Martinez's podcast in the past. Latoya, and just some of the things that they catch in the comments and the things that they're having to defend. It doesn't make it good. It's one of those things where I'm like, I'm glad I'm not really famous. It's because it's just, it's kind of sad to watch because they're doing such important work, right? For every troll that they're getting on the internet, there's also like 5 other people who are like, oh my God, maybe I can find joyful movement. Maybe it's not running, but if you see somebody doing something and they're enjoying themselves, you're like, well, maybe I should try that thing that I thought I would enjoy. And so I'm glad that they exist, because I think that it for them to exist on a bigger platform, a bigger space, and they deserve it. Like, they put in the work. They are very just into it. They know how to conduct themselves through the ether. I just don't know if I would ever be able to manage it that way. But I do thoroughly enjoy giving of myself back to the community as a coach, as a support, and really pulling people hopefully into something that they can find lifelong joy in. But my actual career aspirations, I would love to be a CIO is my current end goal. So it's funny because I think that a lot of athletes probably exist in that space. Like those of us that are, we're not getting paid to run long distances, or we're not getting our health insurance from long distances. But I appreciate those who are doing it full time and are really putting themselves out there, because not only is it the act of doing all the things, but it's also the things that they're having to deal with as far as, naysayers and people that don't support, or people trying to, poke holes in their story. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think the representation of people of color, especially women, in endurance sport is really great. And all the women that you spoke about, Myrna Valero, especially the one that comes to mind for me, is really crucial. And it is unfortunate, the negative comments that they receive in regards to who they are and how they're showing up in their running communities. And I totally understand not wanting to have that level of visibility to a broader audience, and avoid that type of attention. In a sense, you are doing that, just not at their level. But have you received any negative comments or unwanted attention at the local level from where you're at now?
So what's kind of nice is that a lot of it happened probably after that first marathon, where people were like, what is she doing? Why is she doing it? And then I will say, you get offhand comments regardless, right? Like one time I was out running, and I had a guy ask me have you tried turmeric? And I'm like,
that's going to be the solution.
I'm not trying anything. I'm trying to breathe. Is what I'm trying to do. So it's just, I get that a lot. And it's actually been funny. The last couple of weeks I've been running with a friend who we all kind of were in the same group, but she was never really with me. Mm-hmm. Or I would they would run off and I would kind of catch them. And so the past couple of weeks, she's been right by my side, because she's kind of, on the recovery kick, and I'm kind of slowing down too, because it's just hot. Yeah. And so she's like, oh my God, do people do this all the time? People will cheer me on, or people will stop their car and be like, are you okay? So it's really funny. And it's now funny, but it used to irritate me a lot more, because it's are you cheering me on because I'm what you think people should be doing? Or are you cheering me on because you're just happy to see me out here? And I can never know what people's actual intentions are, but most folks in Richmond, very nice, very friendly, and just will give you a wave or be like, oh, I should get out there with you, especially when you're running in the fan. I thoroughly enjoy the coffee crowd. There's a couple houses where they'll be on their porch drinking coffee, and they'll have their dogs out, and they're like, hey, because they see me, right? They see me, day, week in, week out.
Yeah.
But I'm very lucky. I think I'm very sheltered. I also think that the brands that I work with and support are very good about making sure that I'm also protected. So I think that makes a big difference as well, because a lot of times people want diversity in their campaigns and things, but they don't know how to come across it in a way, or they weren't expecting people to be like, oh, well, because you have so-and-so there, I don't want to be a part of it anymore. So
yeah,
I'm very blessed to kind of be in that nice, like, middle recognition space.
What are some ways that they try to protect you?
If there are negative comments, they will usually go out there and like, no, we're not doing it. And even just providing visibility, right? Because a lot of brands don't have folks that look like me. And so if it's, and actually I'm in a campaign right now with Salt Stick and NYKKI's Hydration. They put me right in the middle, and I'm like up next to some dude who's like, who wins Ironmans. And I'm like, look at that. And because even just that, right? It's like, oh, wow. Like, you guys see me as the athlete that I believe myself to be. And sometimes it's just that, right? It's, you are an athlete and living and existing real athlete. And it doesn't matter how that shows up, right? Because people can choose their sport of choice. It doesn't have to be running. It could be, even if you're going to Zumba once a week, I consider you an athlete because Zumba is hard.
Yeah, especially if you don't know the dance moves. I took a Zumba class one time and I was like, what are we doing?
Yeah, it's funny because everybody knows it and you're like, was there a pre-class?
Yeah. Yeah, you got to be on cue for those claps for sure. I want to talk about Ahmaud Arbery. When that happened, I mean, that you had to have a very visceral reaction to that. Ahmaud Arbery was killed while he was out for a run, and I know that death in particular. I think that was in 2020. That had a very strong impact in not just the Black community, but the running community at large.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that?
So at the time, I was actually president of the Richmond Road Runners Club. And along with Ahmaud Arbery, we are still reeling from George Floyd. We're still dealing with the kind of having this reckoning of things. And the hard part, I think, for Black folks specifically is that, we know, right? We know that there is a chance that once you cross the threshold of your home and you're out in the world, people are going to perceive you however they're going to perceive you. You can do whatever you want to be as safe as possible, right? So specifically with running, I tend to run before the sun comes up. I keep a light on my chest. I am in the gear. So I have the uniform of, your hat, your singlet, your compression socks that usually have a funky pattern on them to be as non-threatening as possible. Right. And I think that for a lot of us, we're like, oh gosh, we can't even do, it's another thing that we can't even do, that we can't feel safe. And I had been asked by the Road Runners Club of America president. He was like, what can we do? And I was like, the hard part is that we can't fix individual people's views, but what we can do is continue to exist and to live and to disarm people. Because it's the little things, right? It's I don't feel safe in this neighborhood. Well, why don't you feel safe in this neighborhood? Let's have that conversation. What are you concerned about? And I people encounter me all the time out and about, and they probably you don't belong in this neighborhood, but they've seen me enough now where it's okay, we're not worried if we see folks coming through. But if you see those messages on Nextdoor that are that's a red flag, confront them. Confront those folks. Because you could be the question mark that they needed in their mind to be okay, I shouldn't be threatened. They're just trying to run around. And we see it in all the neighborhood pages. Oh, and if you haven't had a chance, it's terrible. But it's also, there's moments where I'm wow, it's good to know where people are still existing. But I think that particular moment was also a cross point because a lot of running groups are very, very white, And so a lot of folks were started to look around at their own running group and be well, why isn't there more diversity? And one of the things that I even got in some of the conversation, now mind you, I am the president of an organization that has 3,000 members. I don't know what the demographic numbers are, but they're not great. People are like, well, they just don't run. And I was like, that is literally the biggest lie I've ever heard. Because it's like, I see people out, right? You run the same time every day, every week. You start seeing the same folks. And you're like, well, what are the barriers to entry in this group? Are we having events at the wrong times? Are we not accessible? And why is that? Is it lack of shoes? Is it because we wear certain clothing? Is it because, and so we started to dive into that as a club. We ended up creating the ACE initiative, which was basically around like access, community, and then also experience. So making sure that not only are we bringing folks into the fold, but that the experience is actually worth having, right? Because if you come and you're still feeling like this is not for me, you're not going to come back. And so I think a lot of run clubs had that conversation. But also in response, I will say that a lot of the Black running communities across the country have started to explode because people were like, wait, there's groups for us? And it's like, yeah, they do exist. And I think that we're very lucky here because there are a lot of groups that have popped up, even in the last, like, honestly, couple months. And you're seeing good representation in all of them. Mm-hmm. And that is something that I don't think I would have seen in Richmond, even in 2019, 2018. But we're starting to see kind of things level out. There's a lot of different groups depending on what you need, time frame, whether you're trying to go for a different goal, but we're in all of them and we're seeing more of that representation across the board. So I will say that I'm still very sad for Ahmaud Arbery because I don't think that it should take someone dying for these things to change. Yeah. But at the same time, the reactions that were had actually spun up action in the running community, and compared to George Floyd in the broader community, I just don't think those changes made and stuck. Whereas in the running community, I see more sticking than not. We still have a long way to go. We still have a long way to go. But it changed. It changed, got there.
Yeah, definitely. I think just the combination of all the deaths that happened that year against people of color, starting with George Floyd and, up to and past Ahmaud Arbery, just really put a lot of things in perspective. Plus, with the pandemic, that put a lot in perspective for people too. No one should feel unsafe, going for a run or going for a bike ride or doing anything, no matter what your color of skin is. And it is a tragedy that happened. But I agree, like you said, a lot of good has come from it as a result of that perspective being widened and, more people seeing that representation and providing more diverse opportunities for people to, get out there and get involved in the community too. I know, Black Girls Run and Black Girls Bike, they're really popular and prevalent. I've seen them out at various events in the area, and I know that they have chapters all over the country as well.
Yeah, actually, their owner lives in town.
Yeah, really.
Black Girls Run, she lives here. And then you've got Black Men Run. You have, there are just so many groups. We Off the Couch has kicked off, and they're a really neat group. They meet at different places all over the city. And just a bunch, there's like Texas Beach Track Club that just popped up, Richmond Running Collective, and that's a group of people that are like, I want to run fast. And I'm like, I'm not your target demographic, but I'm happy that y'all exist.
Totally. That's awesome. So looking at the big picture, what would you say is your why for why you love running and supporting this running community?
That's a good question, because as much as we tell our athletes, and I do this, I'm like, know your why. Make sure you know why you're doing something. And it's so funny because it has shifted and changed over the years, right? I think at first for me, it was like, all right, well, I'm new to town. I want to do something. And and I felt like I was getting accolades just for existing. And I think now that I'm almost a decade into this running thing, and several years into coaching, and kind of also just maturing in general, right? Because you still grow up outside of one linear journey. I think for me now, I am really taking the time to love myself, right? Whether that's attached to a goal or not, doing things that I enjoy and finding that joy in running, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be tied to a race goal, but really finding the joy in any activity, whether it be physical activity or not, has been really my anchor these days of why. And it's, wanting to see places that I haven't seen before. Like I just got back from Wyoming. I ran the Grand Tetons. And it's like, that's not something that, the early days of me running, I would have done. But like now I'm like, oh, there's national parks and I can run in all of them, right? So it's like looking back at that and like, oh, like that is exciting. Like running in new places, finding new places. And then also a piece of that too is, for me, it's like, well, if people see me out running and enjoying myself and doing a physical activity that is joyful movement for me, then maybe that they'll seek their own joyful movement. It doesn't have to necessarily be running, right? As I'm all for people finding what works for them and something that they could do long term. Mm-hmm. But I think that being visible has given that space for people who thought they couldn't, that they're allowed to, like, oh, they do make running gear in my size. Oh, they do. And those are conversations I get in my DMs all the time. Like, oh, like what kinds of sports bras do they have? Like, oh, well, let me show you, like, this is like the size chart I use. This is what this is what I've come to know, and kind of sharing some of those things from a different perspective too. So I think that the why has been twofold. I think that supporting this running community has been so great because not only have, like, obviously I've given to it in various ways through being a race director, being the president of Richmond Road Runners Club, being a coach, being a volunteer coach, and really just trying to pull people along with me. Because it's also given a lot back to me. I've gotten lifelong friends, people that I can call at the drop of a hat. The Lucky Road Run Store trailer moved me from my first apartment to my first home. Like I actually saw them this weekend and mentioned that too. I was like, well, he was like, we were talking about that. We were over on your side of town. And he's like, oh, she's over here. But I mean, they moved my first apartment, the running community packed me up and moved me, and has taken care of me in ways that I didn't expect. And especially being a young person moving to a city where, like, I had friends, right? Because a lot of people from Roanoke end up in Richmond, but it just gave me more, and it gave people that I would be willing to re-sign up for something. And it gave me people where, they've gone through just really, a lot of people have gone through a lot of tragedy over the years, and we're still here. We've had members of the community pass away, and it's like, but keeping the community together has really made a difference. And I think that watching it change and grow, and also my, involvement flux as, like, sometimes I jump in, sometimes I take a little step back to take care of myself. But I think that all in all, it's more positive than negative. And so that is really where I'm like, okay, if I can add a piece here, if I can connect the dots over here, then I will continue to contribute that, because you never know what somebody might need, right? So
totally.
Very lucky to find the running community at the point in my life where I was, fresh out of college, early 20s. And now that I'm, 32 and looking back, it's like, oh, wow, like that has been an adventure. And it's really, so far, like, I've not wanted for anything as far as like, oh, like my life is boring. My life is far from boring.
Yeah, couldn't agree more with that. So I know, like, as far as like your fitness journey goes, your health and wellness journey, that's changed a lot since you were in your 20s to now. And I know you talked about this on other podcasts, including Holly Zazer's podcast, How the Wise One Grows. But can you just share your perspective on your health journey now and how that's changed over the years?
Yeah, so it started out really as like, oh, I'm going to drop a lot of weight. Like, running's the key. Now, mind you, I said before that I've always been pretty active.
Yeah.
So it's like we all think that we think of our bodies as a problem to solve instead of really looking at, okay, am I happy? Am I healthy? Am I safe? And so a lot of those early years, I was probably just extreme dieting, not eating enough. It's a miracle, honestly, I've not been injured because just the lack of nutrients that were running through my body at that time. And then I got to a point, going to doctors, getting the blood work, and of course you get the like, oh, you should drop some weight. And it's like, like, I don't think you understand how hard we've been trying. Yeah. And so it got to a point where I had a conversation with Tressa, and I cannot for the life of me remember her last name. She goes by T-Rex, and she has a Eastern medicine background and a Western medicine background. And we're sitting at Elwood's, and I was like, I just can't figure it out. I cannot figure it out. I don't know what's going on. I don't know why my body won't get smaller. And she was like, is that what you want? She was like, what, do you think there's something wrong? And I was like, actually, I don't, because I keep getting these blood tests back that are fantastic. I everything else is looking fine. Like, I feel good. I feel strong. I'm running 10 miles and I feel great. I just don't know what's wrong with me. And she's like, maybe there's nothing wrong. And I think that conversation was probably the catalyst of like how I view my body and take care of my body today. And I've since seen a nutritionist and things like that. And I will say that going to a nutritionist, specifically a dietitian, registered dietitian, because anyone can call themselves a nutritionist. It is not a protected term. And a lot of people don't know that. But a registered dietitian, I started seeing one a couple years ago. And she was like, oh, well, here's the problem right here. And it's like, oh, you're not eating enough to sustain regular body function. It's like, oh, all right. And so you try different things. I've added more food back in to really support. And then I was like, oh my God, I feel so strong. I mean, it just felt it. I was like, okay, so this is what being nourished feels like. And then this is what a functioning body being nourished felt like. And so now I'm really leaning into that space of making sure that I'm nourished, making sure that I am, drinking my water. I'm taking vitamins by recommendation from, the doctors and just making sure that I'm keeping it in a healthy space, because it's easy to slip back into old behaviors where it's like, oh, I can just exercise if I can, add on another 45 minutes, add on another 30 minutes, then that's good. That's going to be the key. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Is that really what we're trying to do productively? So I will say, I even said it earlier with my sister, where her goal specifically was to lose weight. And so for her, I'm happy for her because that was her goal. Right. You can find health and wellness outside of a weight loss journey goal. But for me, I have stepped away from the weight loss journey. And now I'm really just focusing on where can I build muscle? Which has kind of been fun. It's been a fun journey to lift more weights and really break up the running, because, you don't want to do overuse injuries. I've kind of been in off season because I don't have any big goals on the calendar. So it's been nice to pick up some more weights and try rowing and get on the bike. And that has been fun to just try different things. And then also just see what a nourished body will return to me from those efforts. So it's like, oh, okay. And of course, my body has not really changed. I will say I can go back and wear clothing more frequently. So it's almost as if my body has come to a size and it's maintaining that. And so that is also really nice to not have to buy something new every season. But it's different. And shifting that mindset, I think, has been healthier for me, and it's also been more sustainable for me.
Yeah, that's huge. I've gotten more into strength training over the past couple of years as well, and I think that's definitely helped me with my metabolism and my body composition. I can say that I've lost about 50 pounds, which was, great. That was what I wanted to do. So I'm happy with it. It's great cross training for, building that strength, so you can be a stronger runner and cyclist. So, that's great to hear that you're getting that cross training as well. And I know strength training also supports your nutrition as well.
Oh yeah, it makes a difference. And then, because I think a lot of times runners just lean only into running. Right. And then what happens is that they get injured and then they have nothing else and then they panic. And so being able to oh, wait, this strength will help to keep me, help my endurance, run longer, stronger, and without having to really do a lot of damage. It doesn't take much to really get what you need out of strength training too.
Yeah, and it's great for your mobility and your functional strength as well. Just being able to, squat or hold things up over your head. Heavy weights, heavy objects, whatever it is. Just live life healthier, and that's ultimately what it comes down to. What does the quality of your life look like? So that's great that you're doing that and seeing some benefits from it. We're looking towards wrapping up. I just have a few more questions, starting with our mindset moment. What is a quote or phrase that helps you stay positive in difficult circumstances?
Forever forward.
What does that mean?
So it was one of those things that I had, you ever be out running and you're I don't really I don't have anything to think, elevator noises in the brain, it's just nothing was happening. And I was like, well, I need something to focus on or I'm going to just go home. And so Forever Forward kind of popped up. And then what's kind of cool about Forever Forward is that it also works backwards. Forward forever. Because sometimes it feels more forward forever than forever forward.
Yeah.
And then also I a couple years ago I entered a contest to get my slogan on a pair of socks. And I won. And so Forever Forward is on very limited pairs of socks. But it's kind of cool because you can wear them both ways.
Can you still buy those socks somewhere?
No, sadly they are long gone, but they went to the cost from them or proceeds from them did go to a really neat organization. And that woman has since passed away, but they used to donate their medals to children that were terminally ill. And that was and it still is, I think it's still a really big nonprofit. But she selected that phrase and almost a year before she passed away. But it was very cool to me that that little bit of something was something that she could carry with her in that last year. And she was I just love this phrase. And so it's also cool to kind of have that tie-in with it. Yeah,
it's such a great cause. I hope you got a pair at least before the pulled out.
I have two that are hidden away from the moths.
If you ever get another sock sponsorship deal, maybe you can get that printed on a new pair of socks.
I am currently sponsored by a sock group that is not the original sock group, Pro Compression, and I probably could talk them into doing a Forever Forward sock.
I highly encourage. Definitely let me know if that does happen.
Will do.
Cool. Next is our PMA Warrior of the Week. Who is someone who helps you to maintain a positive mental attitude?
It's the back of the pack. And I know they're not a person, but they are the people. Those folks that are at the end of the race, chances are they have trained longer than most people. They have a longer on-ramp, but also they just have the best attitudes. A lot of folks in the back of the pack, and I spend a lot of time there because I am a card-carrying member of the back of the pack. But it's nice to be back there sometimes and just hear people's story. I've met some of the nicest human beings in the back of a horrendous race for me. I'm having a terrible time, and then a miscellaneous person from a state I've never been to, and then by the time you hit the finish line, you are a fast friend. So, and that has happened more times than I can count at this point. So I would say the back of the pack is the winner for me.
Awesome. And you'll be right there with them.
I will be right there with them.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, NIKKIA. It was great talking to you. Where can people connect with you if they want to follow along with you on your journey?
Sure. So you can find me on Instagram. I'm at NIKKIA Young. And then from there, you can probably find me on Fitness Protection LLC. That's Fitness Protection Program, which is the group I coach under. But those are really the big places you can find me. I also have my own podcast called Talking Points with Kia Ray. We're currently on break, but we'll be back in the fall. So you can also find me at Talking Points with Kia Ray on Instagram as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a blast.
Welcome back to Evolve Podcast. We got part 2 with NIKKIA Young. We talked about a year ago, and it's crazy that it's been a year. It's been quite the year. We're going through the biggest heat wave we've ever freaking had, and it's making it really hard out there for the runners. How's that going for you and your teams?
It's miserable.
Yeah.
I don't think I've never seen so many people opt out of runs. And to be fair, you're like, I get it.
Yeah, totally. Like, I have been running with my dog in the mornings, but when it's been like, getting close to 100 degrees every day for like the past couple weeks, I'm like, I can't
do that. And I can't do that to them.
Yeah, right. You got to keep them in mind too, So that definitely makes it challenging to want to get out there and, go run. But, I'm sure you guys are still doing it.
Oh, absolutely.
Walkers, they're still out there, of course, as well. So I wanted to check in with you to see how the 2023 marathon went with the walking team. Can you tell me about that?
Oh, it was so great. It was one of those things where you're like, this is just proof that we needed to have this team. So what's really cool about the half marathon walking team is that we're still walking with purpose, right?
Right.
So we had our fastest folks were like walking in a 13-minute mile. Like folks were like, I can't even run a 13-minute mile,
yeah.
But people were clipping.
Yeah.
And then you had like kind of middle pack was like 16. So like a brisk walk, but not anything too crazy. And then our slowest folks, honestly, were still clipping at an 18, which is still pretty brisk of a walk.
Sure.
Especially, depending on how tall you are, short, all that kind of stuff, different health things. And it was just so great throughout that entire season because it brought people out that felt excluded because, when you say marathon or half marathon, people immediately assume, they don't mean me. I can't walk it.
Right.
So it brought out people who honestly probably could have been on the team for years.
Yeah.
And so that was really fun to like cultivate that team. My coaches, my co-coaches were fantastic. They were really fun to just like work with and kind of tag team and be like, all right, well, if we cut here, we can catch more of the team. If you go ahead, I'll stay behind, and we would rotate through to make sure like people were continuously supported because it's still, walking 10 miles is no joke, and walking a half marathon is still no joke.
Yeah, no kidding. And that was the first year that they did a walking team,
Yeah,
right?
That was the first time the walking team was official. We were the Grizzly Bears, which is really fun, because they're strong but slow.
Yeah.
And so that's what I chose for a team mascot. And the amount of bear things you can buy on the internet is really alarming.
It's a lot, yeah. Yeah. So I'm sure that really helped promote awareness of the team, and I'm sure that sparked some more interest for people joining the walking team this year, right?
Yeah, so even 2 weeks ago we were up to 18. Now last year's team was about 45. I honestly think this year's team is probably going to cross either the 50 to 60 mark. We so much so that we had to end up adding a coach. So I'm really excited to kind of have some folks layer in. Just continue to build that community because then what happened after last year's half, we had a ton of folks end up like, I'll train with the 10K team, or I'll try another race somewhere else.
Right.
So that was really nice to like see, okay, you do have a space in this community and now you feel confident to go elsewhere and try different races and travel, and so it was really good.
That's awesome. Making it so much more inclusive and also reminding people they can do things like that, and then they take it the step further, to go try something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. Has your team started training yet for the 2024 event? It sounds like it has.
Not yet. So we are kind of gathering ourselves. It kicks off in the middle of August, which is really fun. And that will go all the way up till August 16th, which is race day.
Awesome.
Or not August 16th, November 16th.
Right. And are you one of the coaches for the walking team still?
Yep, I will be the head coach of the Grizzlies again.
Love that. Who's the other coach? Do you want to shout him out?
Yeah, so we got Sarah Thompson, and we got Michael George. Michael George is really neat because he does a lot of the courses, like marks the courses and makes them like official. Like this is a 13.1, 26.2 course. So he's one of the few people in the city that does that. And then we got Victoria Harvey, who is actually a past coworker of mine, and we found out like we both enjoyed like walking, running, and doing races. And she actually ended up showing up at the 2023 event and helped us with our last person because we were all so spent, you know.
Oh yeah.
And she kind of helped us like, oh, get them water, let's do this, let's do that. And so it was just like, oh, the perfect fit. So. And then Sarah, going back to Sarah's my running partner from day to day. She gets dragged along to some crazy stuff. She's not running a lot of these events, but she ends up doing the training anyway, so it's a lot of fun to drag her along.
I bet. It's great to have people who are supporting you with this cause. It's really great to have a team that can, bring the community together. You can't do it by yourself,
No.
But I'm really interested to hear about the story behind that last person. Because, in our previous conversation, you talked about your love for the back of the pack and making sure that everyone, feels like they belong. Can you talk about that person's story and what it took for them to finish the race?
Yeah, so it was kind of interesting because I thought I did not know kind of all of the story, but you're just kind of there. You be there for people. You don't know what they might be going through. Yeah. And I guess she told other coaches, but when things are health things, people are like, oh, like they told me that in confidence. I'm not going to share that. So I won't go into details about like what this person dealt with. Sure. But because I would usually cover the back, right? Yeah. And so, for hours on end, we're chatting and doing the thing, but like this person was still very motivated, still like, I'm going to do this. I promised myself I would do this, And we get about halfway through the season and she discloses that she has this health issue. And it's funny because, I think when we think of certain health things, obviously we have a thought in our mind of what that person looks like, right? You don't ascribe certain health issues to certain body types. And this person did not fit any of that body type, And so it's so funny when she's like, oh yeah, I'm dealing with this. And I was like, that makes so much sense. But you're not going to ask somebody like, hey, are you all right? You feeling good? But she would just keep pushing. She'd keep going. And she did not stop. And what was even funnier about like the whole thing is that we got to the finish line and the timer is going usually based off of like the 8K start, right? Which is like 30 to 40 minutes before we actually get going. So at first she's like so defeated because she's like, oh my God, like I missed my time. And I was like, that wasn't your start time. Right. You were in the back of the half wave and this clock's been going since XYZ time. True. And so when she started, like she looks, she figures it out and she's so excited and she clears her time. Honestly, what's funny is that she has done better than some of my running half marathon folks in previous years. Really? Cleared the time better by like 40 plus minutes. Wow. So it goes to show like, just because folks are walking doesn't mean they're putting in less effort. Honestly, what I discovered in even coaching this team was that it is harder on the body, right? Because you're doing more time. Chances are it's warmer by the time you finish. And because of the way we walk, you're really like lighting up that posterior chain. And it's really targeting like that glutes quad space. Whereas like when you're jogging or you're running, you're kind of giving some of that bounce, right? You're kind of distributing like some of that like force. When you're walking, it's almost like a pound. Right. And so, it's really funny. Like when I get home from those walking stints and I'm like, I gotta go lay down. I gotta go lay in a tub somewhere because it can be really hard on you. But it has also helped my personal running because it's almost like that longevity. It really helps like with that piece, which was so fun to figure out too. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm sure you gained some great perspectives from that. And yeah, I mean, even walking my dog in this weather is really difficult. Yeah.
But yeah, I totally understand that. In the past few years, several new running groups have popped up, like Girls on the Run, you mentioned them, as well as We Off the Couch, 804 Run Club. Are you affiliated with any run groups, or have you attended any?
So most of the times for the run groups don't work for me.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, just the way that they're structured. Or honestly, if you see me in daylight, I have miscalculated something. I like to be out like before the sun rises, whether it's this weather or not.
Yeah.
But I will say I'm really excited about these different groups kind of cropping up because it gives people a different perspective. It gives people a different space.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times it's easier to jump into something when folks are either look like you or they are sharing different values and things like that. And so I think that if, for example, a 10:30 on a Saturday sounds way more appealing to you than a 6 a.m., then rock on. So I'm really glad these groups exist to kind of like provide that experience and kind of meet folks where they are, right? Like you might not want to hop into an established group, right? You might not feel comfortable there. And also, it's all about getting the movement in, right? So that's what I love, is that providing more opportunities for different folks to feel like they belong in a community is what I'm all about.
Yeah. I had Jeff Ocampo on recently. He's a videographer. He's also a runner and a dad. He talked about, balancing parenthood and his career, and also like making sure he gets his workouts in. And he's also a Filipino man. So, he really liked We Off the Couch, since they have such a diverse group, a lot of their leadership are people of color as well. And, they provide great representation for people of color in the community to come and run together,
Yeah, they're doing some great stuff.
Yeah.
I'm really excited that group has grown and it's gotten that notoriety. I'm really hoping that they continue to get that. They continue to get maybe some sponsors, some funding, so that they can then continue to do and keep to that mission, because it is important.
And can you tell me more about your involvement with Girls on the Run?
Yeah, so I am finally a board member.
Awesome.
It's kind of funny. I have been involved since I moved here. So Girls on the Run is a philanthropic partner with my sorority, Alpha Sigma Alpha. And that partnership started as soon as, honestly, right after I graduated, which is like, I was like, I'll just get connected with somebody once I move somewhere. So when I moved here, come to find out, what used to be the toy run for Road Runners Club, Richmond Road Runners Club, was one of the first Girls on the Run 5K events.
Cool.
And so I kind of stumbled into it. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I was getting into running, but then also like this program around it's not just about the running with Girls on the Run, which is really cool. It is more so about the character development and using that as a vehicle, or using running and movement as the vehicle for that character development, which is a lot of fun to watch. So I've been a soulmate. I ran the Chicago Marathon for them in 2018. I was a special events chair with them, so I would raise money. But now I'm actually a board member on their governing board, so that's kind of it's like the final stage of my volunteerism with them, which is kind of fun to help make sure that we keep it sustainable and affordable. So by finding sponsors, by going out there and connecting with community groups, but also connecting with volunteers, because we can't run the program without volunteers there ready to help teach the girls and support them. And then also getting participants, we have a lot of kids fitness programming in Richmond. And so what makes Girls on the Run a little different is that character development.
Yeah, it's so important, especially at such a young age. For those who aren't familiar with the program, can you just highlight some of what they do? Yeah,
so it's really neat. I've actually done a couple lessons in person. Another thing, one of those it's hard to get there. But when I get a chance, I go to some of the sessions, and basically it's structured. They gather around, they connect, they will do a session about, belonging, or what does beauty look like to them and how to find beauty in different things. And so there's a warm-up activity that kind of sets the frame for the curriculum. And then they go into more of a here's this week's lesson, and it ties into then them running laps. And those laps help prepare them for the 5K. So it's not like they're doing a strict training plan. It's more as a part of this movement, they're really getting that fitness in to be able to complete the 5K and giving them that early win, right? Could imagine what you could do if from 3rd to 5th grade, you ran your first 5K, somebody walked you from point A to point B, you finished this thing, and you accomplished something. That's a good setup for, the rest of life, especially for young girls.
Yeah, definitely. My earliest memory of running is like being forced to run a mile, in gym class, for like annual physical test or whatever, and just hating it. So, if you can instill those positive memories around movement early on, and also boost their confidence along the way, it's incredible work. Yeah. And are you primarily working with girls in like elementary school age?
Yeah, so there's 2 programs that are under that Girls on the Run umbrella. You've got Girls on the Run, which is 3rd through 5th grade, and then you've got Heart and Soul, which is a middle school program.
Okay.
Heart and Soul is a little bit newer, a little bit more mature, but still the curriculum meets the girls where they're at. But then they all come together to do that 5K at the end of the season, whether it's fall or spring.
Okay, cool. And it sounds like people who graduate from that program are still involved later on in life as well, which is awesome. Yeah,
we actually have a board member who was a Girls on the Run participant in her early years, which is so fun to watch that revolve around.
Yeah, I bet. That's super cool. Were you involved in any groups like that growing up?
There was a group called Smart Girls, and I think it was quickly devolved.
Yeah.
I went to the Boys and Girls Club, and I think that was one of those programs that they tried to roll out, and then by the time my youngest sister went through, it was no longer there.
That's too bad. What are your thoughts on the current state of walking and running culture in Richmond?
As the president of Richmond Road Runners Club, I think that we're getting there. I will say that there's a lot more inclusivity. I feel like that's really been fun to watch, especially with those different groups that are cropping up. But I also think we're seeing more people coming back too. A lot of folks over the last 5 years have had just stuff going on, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's your personal life or you're caring for parents or COVID kind of knocked you out, health challenges.
Yeah.
And so I think we're starting to see more people come back into the fold, and that has been really fun to see, and then also to see folks okay, maybe I'm not going to be what I used to be, but there is still joy to be had in this movement. I think that we still have some ways to go. There's still some, there's always going to be some toxicity in some spaces, but I want to continue to help push that equity, making sure that if folks want to do and be a part of the community, that they can, whether that is providing funding or education or in different pieces and parts, because sometimes it's not always the money piece. It's also providing opportunity in a location that people feel safe in, right? So making sure that we're looking at all aspects of that part of the experience too.
Right. Well, I think your involvement in all of that is playing a major role in helping to continue to make progress in those areas, and provide more representation to other people to help them feel welcome in this space.
Yeah, that's the hope.
Have you run any personal races in the past year?
Yeah, I've had a couple fun ones. I'm trying to think. So if we talked about a year ago, I went to the Grand Tetons and ran a half marathon. That was a lot of fun. Was not altitude trained, but here we kind of can't do it.
Yeah, it's hard.
The closest you got is what is it, Mill Mountain maybe? But even then, or Roanoke Mountain, but that's nothing compared to what they have out west. But that was a great experience. It's gorgeous out there, and it's fun to see different mountains. I love our mountains. I love the Blue Ridge.
Absolutely.
I went to college out there, and I truly believe it is just one of the most gorgeous places on earth. But
it's beautiful.
Going to the Grand Tetons, it was different. Seeing the wildlife, there was wildlife on the course.
Oh, wow. What'd you see?
Around mile 8, I saw a cow kind of lounging in a stream. And I was like, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, that'd probably feel really nice.
Yeah, it was fun. There were a lot of different things out there. There were some bison off in the distance, but the cow was very close. And then I've also I did Shamrock this year, and I also did the Orange County Marathon, or half marathon, as part of the Road Runners Club of America conference. So they always try to tack a race at the end of a conference. And I was like, well, I haven't done California yet, so let's like pop it on. And it was really interesting to run in California because the sun was hot, but the air was cool. So it kind of had that weird feeling of like, am I warm? No, that breeze felt pretty good. Like, put your top back on. Okay, take it off.
Where in Orange County was it?
So it actually kind of like wound through a bunch of them. So like it was like Costa Mesa, and then like you rolled into like Anaheim, and then you ended up, it's almost like doing like a circle because we ended up back in Costa Mesa. And I was still
Nice.
I was like, I thought we went in a straight line the whole time, but I guess not.
Yeah, it's funny how races can feel like that sometimes. You know, you end up going in weird places and somehow end up back where you started. That's cool. So it sounds like they all went pretty well.
Yeah. I feel like you learn a lot with each one, and especially when I travel, you just kind of go in a little blind. Like, yeah, you can do the research and you can see like, oh, these are the conditions and this. But it's different when you are actually physically in a space and you're like looking at this hill for the first time, where you're like, oh, I didn't think that was going to be the conditions of this.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're no stranger to, you know, walking up hills. You know, of course, every runner, you know, has done that and needs to do that. You know, you have to listen to your body and
absolutely
give it exactly what it needs in that moment and adapt to those situations as they come up.
Yeah. The Grand Tetons was a great example of that. Because you got to I was like, I felt great for like the first 9 miles, and I was like, oh, I can't breathe.
Yeah, right. The elevation catches up to you.
And it was just really funny because I'm like I felt physically fine, but catching your breath felt so weird. And then it's funny because everybody kind of hit them at once. And it was like, yeah, it got me at mile 8. Like, oh yeah, like you'll feel better at the end. And like, it took me like a day to breathe normally, but it was worth it.
That's good. Happy to hear that. Do you have any other races coming up that you've registered for?
Yeah, I'm really excited for the Maine Marathon. So I'm going to do Portland.
Awesome.
And it's going to be in the fall, and I'm really looking forward to that. So it's kind of funny with half marathon training. I'm going to treat those as part of the training without like, you know, not helping people my training, but it's like, oh, it's time on my feet. And then when I finish up with folks, I'm actually probably going to, depending on the heat, either hop on the treadmill or keep doing several more miles to round out my mileage for the day. But I'm not too worried about like getting the mileage. It's more of the like, all right, like we're gonna be ready. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to cooler temperatures.
That'll be really nice. Yeah.
And the fall foliage in Maine.
Have you been to Portland or Maine before?
No, I haven't. And so it'll be a first time trip. I'm gonna fly into Boston, and a girlfriend's gonna drive us up. And then we're also going to hit the national park that's up there, and I keep putting an R in its name, but it's Acadia.
Cool. That's awesome. I know you also have been coaching with Fitness Protection.
Yeah.
How's that community been growing with your involvement?
So that community is interesting because it's all virtual.
Oh, really?
So none of the clients are like people that we see in person. Which can make it pretty interesting when you think about that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of folks, when they think of a run coach, they think of somebody that they're seeing every single day, or they're seeing, you know, at least a couple days a week.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of virtual coaching, right? So what's cool about Fitness Protection is that my coach is the founder of Fitness Protection, and then I'm kind of coaching underneath her. And lately I've tapped into a strength program for runners, which is fun. It's called Ship Shape because I love alliteration. Yeah. And you know, we didn't want people to feel like sculpt, or, you know, because that wasn't really the point. It's just making sure you're doing enough strength to not get injured is really the goal. And so doing those strength splits has been really cool. We've added a couple of folks into the fold with that. It's also been interesting because I feel like there's been a lot of rebound in that virtual coaching space where folks who were like, I don't have time for this, I'm just trying to survive, are now like slowly coming back and are like, I'm ready to sign up for something again, or they're getting back to it, or they're no longer injured. So it's been fun.
That's great. How are you coaching people virtually, like with running? How does that work?
Yeah. You know, it's funny too, because I think people are also like, you can't possibly know how they're doing without putting eyes on them, right? And what's fun, I have a couple personal clients under that umbrella, but we utilize a tool called Training Peaks, where basically it's an app where we go out there and we plug in, like, I want you to do this workout. You can plug in, yoga, cross training, all this stuff. Right. And then because pretty much everybody has a smartwatch, once they plug in their information, it goes into Training Peaks. Okay. And Training Peaks has these different markers of like, how stressful was that for you? What's your cadence? Seeing like just how much volume that truly was on the body. Was this person going their max or were they going their min? And so I'm able to kind of see like these different markers to say like, hey, are you tired? Yeah. Hey, how did today feel? And a lot of times I will just ask like, hey, I see this. How did today go? Mm-hmm. And folks are pretty responsive. If you don't hear from folks, usually that's like, hey, are you alive? Yeah, right. But it's been a fun experiment because it's one of those things where you kind of have to like trust yourself in what you're building for that person. Sure. And what you know. Another thing that's kind of fun is that specifically with a lot of my clients, I met them via Peloton community. So a lot of them, I can be even creepier and go into their Peloton account and see like, oh, look at that heart rate from here to here. Like there are ways you can do and see that kind of stuff in the Peloton app. So for some of them, I'll prescribe specific runs and be like, this is what I anticipate this should be like. And then I go out there and look and see, all right, what happened here? Like, did your cat scare you? Did your kid fall down? Because that's usually what heart rate spikes are, right? Yeah. Something funny. Like, my poor coach one time was like, what happened here? And I was like, there was a toy spider hanging from a tree.
That's cool that you can, like, decipher that from the data. That's awesome.
Yeah. What's fun about living in a data-rich world is that I feel like we can find more and more pieces and ways to tweak. As long as you don't get obsessive about it, because that can be really hard on athletes I've seen.
Yeah. Have you found that your findings are pretty accurate, like with the information that you have? Like, and then you talk to them, of course, to get more context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, usually, I wouldn't say spot on. Sometimes I'm like, I will ask like, hey, is it workout stress or is it life stress? Because sometimes you can't tell the difference in those numbers. True. Especially if somebody's like in a high stress zone the whole time. You're like, were you stressed out before you left your house, or was it the run itself that stressed you out? And so those are usually where I'm like trying to decipher. And like, all right, maybe we need a rest day, or maybe like because your body just can't figure out which one is which, so it can bog you down.
Yeah, for sure. So I saw on Instagram that you are also certified as a RRCA run coach.
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about that certification and what you're doing with it?
Yeah, so it's actually, I've had it since 2020, but I really didn't lean into that whole like personal coaching piece because honestly I've been coaching folks since like 2015. Because one of the things we do in Richmond is we have more coaches than we have certified coaches, right? Not saying that, someone that's not certified can't coach you well. Right, of course. But I think that sometimes having that extra layer of education can sometimes be really helpful and give us different perspectives. Mm-hmm. So I got that certification in 2020 with the help of Game Changers, which is a really neat group that is helping women of color coaches get their certifications, because sometimes, like I said earlier, it's not just the money, it's the getting the access. Right. And those classes are super coveted. And they used to be all in person. Once the pandemic hit, now they're virtual. And the virtual seats go so fast. To the point where, they open it up, they're gone. We're actually having some classes here in Richmond because I was like, I want more educated coaches in Richmond. Yeah. But what's been cool about that is that I've been able to kind of like, evangelize for like, hey, you do need this certification. It can be really helpful. It's connecting me back to RRCA, which is the Road Runners Club of America, and has kind of allowed me to be connected into some of their leadership and like, hey, this is what I think. This is how I think about it. And just being able to support other coaches too. Like, hey, I've seen this in person and I've seen this virtually, because they are very different experiences.
I bet. Yeah. I saw that you were part of Game Changers as well, and that you're also a race director, which I think we might have glossed over very casually in the last conversation. So can you tell me more? Have you organized a race before?
Oh yeah, Yeah, I've done a couple. I've done quite a few. I did Toys for Tots 5K for several years, like 3 to 4 years. I had a race called Stratford Hills 10K. We ended up having to shut that down because the costs were just absorbing it to try and put it on.
Sure.
And then I am planning a half marathon, part of a series that's going to happen next year. And that's going to be a lot of fun. So, because I've never done anything longer than a 10K on like the race directing front. So I'm looking forward to kind of try something a little longer. And it's going to be part of a running festival that we're putting on. So I'm looking forward to that. But let me tell you, race directing is probably harder than running the race.
I'm sure, yeah.
Because, it's a lot of paperwork. It's making sure you have the insurance. Working with the municipalities, there have been times where I put in paperwork in February. I got an answer a week before the race in May.
Yeah,
so you're like, I don't know if we're going to get this permit. I don't know if we're going to have what we need. Do we have enough water? Can we get sponsors? Is the neighborhood going to be mad because we're running through the neighborhood?
Yeah, I can't imagine. It's like putting on a circus practically, like by yourself. That's amazing. Can you tell me more about the race series and those events?
Yeah, we're still working on the details, but we're basically looking to have multiple races over the course of 2 days. Right now we're still working on nailing down the details of exactly where and how.
Sure.
But we're hoping to bring an ultra marathon to the city.
Cool.
And so that is going to be fun. Just another option because people have been wanting longer distances.
Yeah.
And, in bringing those longer distances, you also have to remember, there are people who run an 18-minute mile and also want to run a longer distance.
Yeah.
So making sure that we can provide a course that can stay open without having to, utilize too many police resources because you do have to have police on the roads.
Yeah.
And, just making sure all right, let's make sure that we can provide an experience that's really good for every runner from, beginning to end and from the end to the beginning.
Yeah. Are you planning potentially doing a long course, or are you thinking more of a backyard ultra situation where you have a smaller course that people run multiple times?
We're thinking a long course.
Okay, cool. Love that. Well, there's definitely a lot of options around the area for that, so that should be really cool to see. I think Richmond definitely does need an ultra. That'd be really cool. There's long bike rides Mountain Cat was the one that just happened again in July, or it was in June or July. But you're definitely seeing some longer races becoming more popular here. So it'd be cool for the running and walking community to have something like that too. Yeah. You also started a series of videos on Instagram called Motivation Monday and Race Space.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about these and what the response has been to them so far?
So Motivation Monday was really supposed to be silly. And it actually came out of my run coach used to have a podcast called The Morning Mantra. And it went for a couple years, and then after a while it was she was it's just hard to put together, And I was well, maybe we'll bring something kind of like that back.
Yeah.
And so Motivation Monday just kind of came out of folks really struggling on that Monday morning, and you see all of the folks that are never miss a Monday, and I kind of wanted to I do try to not miss a Monday, but just sometimes people need a little bit of a head start, whether it's they had a rough weekend or you're coming off a holiday. And so people really like Motivation Monday. I did not expect for it to have a fan following. I was I'll just do these stupid little videos. And somebody, take what you need and leave what you don't. Right. But people have really found them. And I think that it's also kind of opened it up for folks that I don't know to kind of jump in and be oh my God, I didn't think about that. You're so right. And so it gets shared out through different communities and things. And folks are this is so great. So I'm glad that I'm saying stuff that resonates with folks and that, that people feel at least oh, she's so right. I did feel like that. Coming off of 4th of July, a lot of people are I'm so tired, everything hurts. And I'm A, it was hot, B, it was hot, C, it was hot.
Yeah, that's all you gotta say. Yeah, 100%. I checked out a few of them They're really fun, positive, bubbly. They show off your personality perfectly. So it makes sense that, people resonate with that. Also, I saw that you were working on something called the ACE Initiative, and that you wanted to make running more accessible to people with lower incomes and help advocate for more diversity in running culture, like we were talking about before. Can you share any updates on that initiative?
Yeah, so that was an initiative I built out in, it's been like 2021. It was when I was president of Richmond Road Runners Club the last time.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I took 2 years off, and now I'm back, and I'm really excited. But I think that we now have more of the ability. We just hired an executive director.
Awesome.
And what's cool about that is that it allows for us to kind of do like the volunteer stuff, and then she can do more of that strategic and finding those sponsors, finding those folks, and then also just making it more available to people. Because I think that we had all these programs and things that are like, the youth camp and, training and all this. And then you're like, but then nobody knows about it. It feels like it's a best kept secret.
Right.
So now we're trying to be better about let's put it out on social. Let's make sure that it's in emails. Let's make sure that we're reaching out. We're actually doing an event. We got approached by a guy named Mike Africa, and he is working. He actually built out a movie with Questlove and John Legend and a couple other folks, and it's about basically social justice and how he had to free his parents. He was born in prison, and for 40 years it took him that long to get his parents out of jail for being wrongfully in prison. So he reached out to us on Instagram, and usually I'm like, oh, okay. But after talking to him and hearing his story and hearing the pieces, I was like, yeah, let's partner. So we're going to build we have a group run and screening combination.
Cool.
So in the morning we'll go out and do the run out from the river, and then in the afternoon we'll go watch the movie in the main library, which is kind of cool. So more opportunities like that, because that's where the other piece of it is too, right? We have to connect with the community, but the community has to connect with us in order for us to then be able to provide those opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a two-way street. Everyone needs to be involved in cooperating together, collaborating together, to make something happen. Have you guys set a date for that run and screening event?
Yeah, so that race is, it's not even a race, it's actually just a group run. But we got a 5K option and a 10K option, and it is the last Sunday in July. So July 29th, is that the 29th? 28th?
Something like that. We'll double check that, but awesome. That's great. Lastly, something I saw a lot in your posts on Instagram, and I think we may have talked about it a little bit last time, is finding the joy. And how do you suggest people find the joy in their running experience?
If you are miserable every single time and it's not 1,000 degrees in the shade, then maybe running's not for you. And that's okay, right? But I would also say, just taking one of those, deep cleansing breaths and being I get the chance to. I think a lot of times we're so caught up in what we are not, when really we should be looking and saying oh, I got a mile in a day. I got a half a mile a day. I got outside.
Yeah.
I have the ability to move my body in a way that allows me to get outside. And maybe not. Maybe it's on a treadmill. Maybe it's I have the ability to move my body. And I'm so grateful to be able to even do that. So I think that the best way to find that joy is to kind of dial in and be let's not focus on what I haven't done yet or what I can't do. Let's focus on what I can do, and let's keep working with that until we can do something else.
Yeah, I love that. Had an interesting conversation today with one of my tattoo artists about looking out for the average person, and how the average person looks at people on Instagram, fitness influencers, what have you, and they say I can't do that. It's aspirational and it can be inspirational, but sometimes it's hard to tell themselves that they could do something if it's if it seems unachievable or undoable to them. What would you say to that person who like is maybe interested in getting into running, or even just, you know, going out for a brisk walk, taking more action to, you know, bring more movement into their life, what would you say to that person?
Yeah, I would say every session will let you chip away from that wall of fear, right? Because that's where I feel like it is. It's like, oh, if I go outside, somebody's gonna see me. It's like, oh my God, I'm gonna go outside and like somebody's gonna happen. And so like you slowly chip away at that, like one move at a time, like one run at a time, setting yourself up in a way it's like, all right, we're gonna do it. It's gonna be great. And maybe it's not great, but you chipped away at that. You proved to yourself like I could do this, and I got back home. Yeah. So I think that's really the big piece is like stick with it, give yourself some grace, know that, you know, where you're at is good, and where you're headed is also good. Yeah. And that, you know, kind of that one of those girls on the runs principles is mastery climate, right? Rather than a like, well, last week you did 9 laps, this week you only did 6. What happened? You know, it's like, well, I did 6 laps really well this time. And so, you know, not being wrapped up in that mastery climate, but rather in that growth climate. The goal is to grow. And so I think that is one of the best ways to like look back and be like, I can do this. I'm going to do this. And I'm going to do it for me. That's the other thing, is that or finding your why. Because the why is also really important. And it could be that your why is someone else, right? You want to be able to be there for your kids, or you want to be able to run with your dog the way you should. And so I think when people really tap in and figure out what is important to them, then they're able to build their goals on that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, NIKKIA.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching Evolved Podcast. Follow at evolvedpodcast.co on Instagram for weekly updates. Subscribe to Evolved Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, and like your favorite episodes. Production and editing by Joe Fitzpatrick. Our theme music, Endless Cruise, is written and performed by Fingers, spelled F1NG3RS.